Do you ever wonder what's up there?
Clouds?
Sky!
Something more?
Okay, now you got me curious.
Just keep climbing. You'll see.
What did you pull?
Well, then I'll shake off the dust.
No smile.
And climb it again.
Well, why on earth would you do that?
Because I'm destined.
Destined for what?
To live like Jesus. To serve others and to live radically.
That's great.
Well, actually,
It's greater.
How much greater?
The greatest!
One with you have
I'm just following the
fall.
What call?
Called
greater things.
Greater things.
Destined for greater things.
Well, good morning. It's good to see you. I was out really late with my family last night. We celebrate Halloween at my house, and so we always look for fun things to do. Last night we went to the Hollywood Forever Cemetery to watch a movie called Paranorman. It's like a cartoon, kind of mildly scary movie that was really great. So just for those of you who are closer to the stage, if I still smell like weed, I want you to know it's not because me and my kids were smoking weed, okay? We were just in the midst of some other people who might have been. So, but we had a really great time. I hope that you're having a good October so far. I want to talk to you today about stories and how our stories change. Sometimes our stories change because the version of the story we tell just changes. It's convenient for us. Maybe it's not even accurate or true. We just change the story that we tell. My grandmother, who passed away at the age of 101 years old, she was my dad's mom. She was a wonderful lady, and I could tell you stories all day about how great she was. But one of her little quirks was sometimes she'd just make a story up or change a story up if it was convenient to her, if it kind of fit what she was going for. For instance, when my dad was a little kid, she didn't like blue jeans. She didn't think they were formal enough, and he had one of his aunts or uncles had bought him a bunch of blue jeans, and so she stole them all one night while he was asleep and told him that the Indians had come in the middle of the night and taken all of his jeans. My dad had issues with Native Americans till he was a teenager and realized his mom had just lied to him. It was a strange thing. My dad told me when I was a little kid, he was like, oh yeah, your grandmother will never admit that she forgot something. She'll always just if there's a thing that happened to all of us and she was there, she won't admit if she forgets. She'll just play along and pretend. And I said, really, what if I were to make something up? He said, you should try it. See if she remembers the fake thing. So I remember one night I was staying over her house and was just about to go to bed. And I was like, hey, Gran, you remember that time that we were in the parking lot of Perry Brothers and there was that little brown dog that you and I stopped and we pet for a while? And she was like, well, yeah, I do. And I was like, Gran, that never happened. And she said, yeah, it did. I think you forgot. Then my dad, when he was in his 40s or 50s, my grandmother baked cakes for a living, and everybody in the small town I grew up in loved my grandma's cakes. I still long for my grandma's cakes. It's one of the things I miss about her, going over to her house and her making cakes and telling us stories. And my dad helped her out because she was getting older and was having a harder time getting around. And one of the things she used to do, she would do a sheet cake, and she would cut it into little squares. But the way she would do it, this was her little trick of the trade. If you took a knife, it would mess the icing up, and she wanted her cakes to look perfect. So she would take dental floss, and she would use dental floss to cut the cakes, and it would do it perfectly. Well, they get to the place where she's supposed to set the cake up for this party that's happening, and she forgot her dental floss, and she just about lost her mind. And so she was like, David, I can't. He was like, there's knives here. She's like, I can't use a knife. People will know it doesn't look right. And he was like, okay, I can go get you some dental floss. So he runs to CVS, and the only kind of dental floss they had was mint dental floss. So he comes back with the mint dental floss, then she lost her mind all over again. I can't use mint dental floss, it's gonna mess up the whole flavor profile, we can't do that. And he was like, it's all I've got. So she used the mint dental floss, but she was so mad at him for messing that up. And then after people started eating the cake, someone came up to her, and she was talking to my dad, and they said to her, Melba, this is some of the best cake I've ever had. And that little mint taste in there, it is so delicious. And my grandma said, oh, that's just a little thing I do. Sometimes the story changes because we just change the story. We just pretend. It's just convenient for us to change the story. Sometimes the story changes because somebody changed our story. In my 20s, I was on church staff at a church in Dallas, Texas, and I had been struggling with faith for a while. And then this church had just a whole heap of problems that we don't have time to talk about today. But I remember there was a meeting that happened where I realized, some of the staff are getting let go. I'm probably going to be one of those. We're going to cut back on things. It's not going well. And I'd had a hard time at this church already. And I just remember coming home from work that day, trying to figure out how I was going to talk to my wife about it, and just feeling so isolated and so alone and so angry at the church and angry at God and angry at Christianity and unsure if I could even do Christianity even more. It was a whole lot that had been going on in my life that had compiled. And I remember getting home and starting to talk to my wife about it, and having, for the very first time in my life, I think I was 23 years old, I started having a panic attack. I didn't know what was wrong. I thought I was having a heart attack or something. I just never experienced anything like it. Because I didn't know how we were going to put food on the table. I didn't know what was next for us. I didn't know about my faith. I was afraid all this was going to impact my marriage. I was panicked, high anxiety. And I remember about the time I was gasping for air, our doorbell rang, and I went to it, and there's a gentleman from our church named Marty who had heard that I might be having a tough day. And he had been very kind to us in the past, but I remember when I opened the door and I saw somebody who'd cared enough to come over, and he had brought a pizza with him. And I remember Marty was, 5'4". He was a very, very short dude. And I remember just collapsing into his arms. It almost knocked us both over because it's very far down for me to collapse. But I remember I just started crying into his shoulder. And he brought the pizza in, and he was like, hey, they were selling these in the parking lot. I was like, is that safe? He said, I don't know, but it was only $8. Let's try it. And we talked. I talked. He did a ton of listening. One of the quotes we love around here is that being heard is so close to being loved that most people can't tell the difference. And he listened to me, he heard me. I actually started walking away from faith shortly after that interaction because of all this stuff. But when I started coming back toward Jesus, Marty's deposit in my life was one of the things that brought me back. Sometimes your story changes because someone served you. They cared for you. And they changed things. I want to look today at one of the last things Jesus does for his disciples before he gets arrested, tried and then crucified and raised from the dead. Shortly before all of that happens, Jesus serves his disciples. I want to look at it today because this is one of the last things he teaches them before he's gone. And as we are in week 2 of this series, Greater Things, we've just been talking about this passage that from John 14, where Jesus said, I tell you the truth, anyone who believes in me will do the same works I have done, and even greater works, even greater things, because I am going to be with the Father. And we just asked last week, how could that possibly be true, that we could do something greater than what Jesus did? And yet, Jesus says we will. And so today, I just want to talk about how your story of service to the world can change someone else's story tomorrow. And I believe God's called each of us to so much more than we're experiencing and living into right now. And so we're going to start with this passage of Scripture in John chapter 13 and verse number 1. And we read this. They're about to have the last meal together, their last supper. And before the Passover celebration, Jesus knew that his hour had come to leave this world and return to his Father. And he loved his disciples during his ministry on earth. And now he loved them to the very end. You know, how you finish is very important because it says a lot, it helps people interpret how you started in the whole middle section. We all know, Shohei Ohtani had one of the best baseball games ever. Some of you lit up right away, and some of you Angels fans, I'm sorry. I know every time it happens, it still hurts. But he had one of the best games ever played in the history of Major League Baseball this week. And if they had lost that game, that would have just been such a bummer, because how you finish, in some ways, reinterprets all the events of the game. Similarly, if you want to help your kids out and you're like, yeah, I'll take you to school, but you get a mile away and you're like, you know what, close enough, why don't you hop out? Why? Here? Right here? This is a busy highway. Yeah, you're 7, you'll be fine. You can take care of yourself. Like that, they wouldn't appreciate how you began because you didn't complete the task very well. And I love that John tells us that Jesus had loved his disciples during his ministry on earth. Right up until this point, he loved them. And now he loved them to the very end. He finished the job. He completed the task well. He was consistent all throughout from start to finish. Jesus is demonstrating here the embodiment of love's endurance. He's about to show them something that's incredibly humble, but he's also showing them that love, true love, endures. It finishes the task. It goes on. It was time for supper. And the devil had already prompted Judas, son of Simon Iscariot, to betray Jesus. So Judas is one of the disciples of Jesus. If you've watched the Jesus movie before, or if you've been around church very much, or maybe if you haven't, like Judas is literally a word we use for someone who betrays us even in our culture, even if you're not super familiar with the gospel accounts of Jesus' life. Judas is the bad guy. He's the one who followed Jesus all these years, and then at the end, for 30 pieces of silver, he betrays him. And so the reason this is put here, I believe, is partly to show that Jesus is about to serve every one of his disciples. And the reader who kind of knows the Judas story might be tempted to ask the question, even Judas? And the author of John just wants us to know, actually, like, Judas is there too, yes. What he's about to do, he does for everyone, indiscriminately, because they didn't earn it. They don't deserve it. But this is what enduring love looks like. Jesus knew that the Father had given him authority over everything, and he had come from God and would return to God. So he got up from the table, took off his robe, he wrapped a towel around his waist, and he poured water into a basin. What he's about to do is wash their feet. So a few words about this in the first century. I remember talking to a scholar of first century Rome a few years ago. I got to meet him at a panel discussion that they were having at university. And I asked him, like, hey, if I were to go back to first century Rome, like, what are one of the things that may surprise me the most? What would I notice the most that might not be obvious to me right now? And the thing he said that I would probably notice right away is the smell. That it would have just been very, very stinky, like old school Chino stinky, old school East Bell stinky, like, years ago when it was just all cow patties as far as the eye could see, like that kind of stinky. It would smell bad. Like people didn't shower regularly. They didn't have like deodorant that's strong enough for a man but pH balanced for a woman. They didn't have this kind of stuff, right? So what did they do? Well, they smelled bad. And you know what you did if you lived back then? You just got used to it. You never knew anything differently. But if you were to jump into a DeLorean and time travel back to first century Rome, one of the first things you would notice is that this stinks. It does not smell good. And part of the reason it stinks and it smells bad is there's no cars for transportation. Some of you taking notes, you want to write that in, okay? No cars in the first century. There's no cars for transportation. So they're walking almost everywhere. And they're walking in mostly open-toed shoes like sandals, thongs. And they're walking on these dusty roads, and it's hot. For much of the year, it is hot. They smell bad. So one of the things that you would do if you were hosting someone, one of the hospitable things that you would do is you would usually have a young person in the household, or if you had the money, a servant. And if you had multiple servants, it was the lowest servant. You would have them wash the feet of the guests in your home because people's feet were gross. And in order for you to really relax, to recline at the table where your feet are somewhat close to the food, like for you to really be able to enjoy the moment, you would want your feet washed. It was a way of extending hospitality to guests and to visitors. But it was practiced amongst the lowest of the low, the lowest person of the household or the lowest servant typically. And so Jesus gets up from the table. He takes off his outer garment and he wraps a towel around his waist and he pours water into a basin. He's about to wash the feet of his disciples. None of them had offered to wash the feet of the people who had gathered. Jesus just spent the last 3 years teaching them what it looks like to serve one another. And one by one, they file into the room and nobody offers to do the thing that would be most hospitable. So Jesus gets up and he begins to do it. Now, I was a pastor in a denomination called the Brethren in Christ for a number of years, and I have a lot of great things I could say about that denomination. Really, really love them. One of the things that they do, or have done for over 100 years now, they've practiced it regularly. Once or twice a year, a lot of those churches, especially the smaller ones, will practice a foot washing service. So they will actually get together with people, like usually on like a Wednesday night or something, and they might have 100, 200 people show up for that, and they actually get like basins of water, and they practice getting down and washing each other's feet. Now, because this is so culturally foreign to us, it is a bizarre thing to participate in for the first time. And I would say the second and third time as well. It's really about the fourth time that you're like, okay, this is a thing that we do. But it was funny. I remember talking to some of the older BIC people when I first got there and asking them their memories of childhood growing up in this culture that practiced this regularly. And one of them would say, well, like my mom didn't ever want to be embarrassed by how bad our feet was when I was a kid. So we always had to wash our feet before our feet could be washed. We'd wash them at home so they wouldn't stink and so that, we'd make sure the toenails were in a good shape, which is missing the point a little bit, I think. But the idea is that they are regularly practicing something not because we need our feet to be washed from all the dust and the caked on odor today, but to remind themselves of the heart of Jesus. And so they continue to practice it. Jesus wraps a towel around his waist, he pours water into a basin, and then he began to wash the disciples' feet, drying them with the towel he had around them. This is, by the way, a picture. This is the gospel acted out. This is Jesus, right? The story of the gospel is that God comes down from heaven. He wraps himself in flesh and blood. He's incarnate now. He serves us. He serves us. He gives his life. He raises from the dead, and then he rises back up. This is Jesus getting up from the table, descending down to wash the feet of his disciples, serving them in full humility, and only after that task is complete, rising up and taking his seat again. This is the gospel acted out. One of the last things that he will do is to physically act out the thing that his whole life has been about. When Jesus came to Simon Peter, Peter said to him, "Lord, are you going to wash my feet?" And Jesus replied, "You don't understand now what I'm doing, but someday you will." In other words, right now this is going to feel like too much. It's going to feel too lavish. It's going to feel uncomfortable because you're serving me as your teacher and as your Lord, but I'm about to actually get down and get my hands dirty and wash your feet. You don't fully understand everything I'm showing you, but one day you will. And in fact, it took a while. It took a while. Well, Peter doesn't love this. No, Peter protested, "You will never, ever wash my feet." Absolutely not. No, Jesus. Peter just always speaks before he thinks. He will make these giant declarations. Jesus will push back and he'll receive the rebuke. This guy just gets slapped around a lot verbally by Jesus in the kindest way. But still, he has to be adamant about it. So Jesus replied, "Unless I wash you, you won't belong to me." In other words, okay, if you want to put your foot down on me, not washing your foot, you can do it. But if you're not going to let me do this, Peter, you're not going to have any part in my kingdom. It's important. You don't fully understand it now. It'll be a while before you do, but this matters. It's important. And I think one of the things that the author is trying to clue us in on, and one of the things that Jesus is saying here essentially is that before we serve others, we have to let Jesus serve us. You can't give what you haven't received. And so part of what Jesus is having to show his disciples is the grace and the humility of servitude, the grace and humility of enduring love. And if you can't receive this from me, you're not going to have it to give to someone else. And for some of us, as we read stories about what Jesus invites us into, the greater things he's called us to do, we just need to know we're not going to be able to fully live into those things until we receive what Jesus has for us. And so just a note, I don't know for sure what Jesus has for you that you're resisting right now. For some of you, it could be forgiveness for your past. It's really common that I'll sit down with someone and hear their story, and the thing that they really can't grapple with is the grace of God. Yeah, but Josh, I've done this, and I've been here, and I keep messing up on this, and they can't forgive themselves. And it's really challenging to pass on what you yourself have not received. If you want to be the kind of person who gives forgiveness, you have to be the kind of person who receives it. For some of you, you haven't allowed God to really heal you, partly because doing so would be an acknowledgement of the pain you face, and therefore there would be pain involved even in a healing process. You would have to sit with it. You might have to talk to somebody about it, a friend, a small group, a pastor, a counselor. And God, I think, desperately wants to rewrite your story and heal your story. But for some of us, we haven't allowed that process to happen. And if you want to be a person of healing and a person of blessing, it's very challenging to pass on what you yourself have not received. For some of us, there's a stronghold in our life. There's something that, it clings to us, like pot smoke at Hollywood Forever Cemetery. It just won't get off. And so for some of us, like we have an anger stronghold. Like our reaction to everything at the possible perceived slight is to get angry. Or our reaction to like someone not living up to what they said they would do for us, or to our kids misbehaving, or to our friend being late. Like we're filled with rage all the time. And it's like some combination of great disappointment, like unmet expectations and fear. And it sits in our chest, and we haven't been healed of it. And so we have a hard time healing those around us, blessing those around us, because we haven't received the healing yet that God so wants us to receive in our lives. Like, I don't know what it is for you. It could be 100 different things. But what Jesus is telling Peter is, like, look, if you want part in this, if you want to serve others, you have to let me serve you first. Because, Peter, you will not be able to give what you have not received. So, Jesus says, unless I wash you, you won't belong to me. And so then Peter replies, well, then wash my hands and my head as well, Lord, not just my feet. And Jesus is like, Peter, I'm not going to give you a bath. Like, you're making this weird, okay? Like, oh, then not just every part of me, Jesus. I'm not going to wash all of you. Part of you is already clean. I just need to wash a little more. I need you to allow me to serve you in this way. After washing their feet, verse 12, he put on his robe again, and he sat down and he asked, do you understand what I was doing? You call me teacher and Lord, and you're right, because that's what I am. And since I, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you ought to wash each other's feet. I have given you an example to follow. Do as I have done to you. What Jesus ends up doing here ends up changing the trajectory of their lives. And he ends up repeating it just a few chapters later after his resurrection when he makes fish for them on the beach. Like, he's the guy who was crucified and murdered, and then when he comes back, he's the one who makes breakfast. Like, he has the same servant heart all throughout this thing. He's serving them to show them what it's going to look like to serve others. In fact, later on, shortly after this, Peter is going to betray him by disowning him 3 times. And Jesus, after his resurrection, he actually brings Peter back into the fold. He restores right relationship with him, but he tells him at that point, Peter, you need to know that if you're going to follow me, if you're going to feed my sheep, if you're going to feed my lambs, if you're going to continue to serve others as I have served you, there's going to come a day where you're going to be led away and you're going to be taken somewhere where you do not want to go. In other words, Peter, this is going to cost you your life. I love Peter's response to that as well, by the way, because John is walking behind them on the beach, and he looks back at John while Jesus is saying this, and he's like, okay, Jesus, but like, what about him? Like, if I'm going to be like, is he, are we all going to die? Like, I mean, he's going to die too, right? If I'm going to die, we're both going to die. And Jesus says, what's it to you? What's it to you? If I want him to remain until I return, what is it to you? You have a mission. Go and fulfill it. Serve as I have served. What Jesus is telling them, right, is if you want to look like Jesus, you got to pick up the towel. If you want to look like Jesus, you have to serve others. And again, we have this unfortunate overemphasis, I think, in the American church of like, oh, the faith decision to follow after Jesus Christ. It's incredibly important, by the way. But in so many ways, the way that we've talked about it is like, oh, the only thing that matters is crossing the line of faith and inviting Jesus to be my Lord. But see, Lord means boss. Lord means I'm now choosing to align my actions, my activity, with that of Jesus Christ. And so if you want to look like Jesus, you have to pick up the towel. If you want to look like Jesus, you have to choose to serve others. And he tells them, like, you won't fully understand this now, but you will later. And indeed, when the early church starts up, the way it goes forward is by how they care for people. And the most egregious sins of the early church are when they don't care for people well. The church grows, it seems, in large part because those who had no place to call their home and no family to call their family found entry into the church. And then they found a group of people who cared for one another and served one another and provided for one another's needs. Like, it became a revolutionary way to live in first century Rome. And people flocked to it by the hundreds and eventually by the thousands until just 150, 200, 300 years after Christianity worked its way through the Roman Empire, it became the official religion of the Roman Empire. And that wasn't great. Like once the church and the state got in bed together, it became majorly problematic. But the reason that happened in the first place is because so many people had found life by following Jesus through the service of that community by then, that it turned the tide of the way Christianity was perceived. Jesus says, like, if you want to follow me, if you want to look like me, you got to pick up the towel, you got to serve. Now look, for a lot of us, we're holding so much right now that it feels like I don't know how I would do anything else or help anybody else. Like I am overloaded. And for some of you, that's probably true. I remember talking just a few weeks ago to a single dad, and he's got 3 beautiful, amazing girls, but he's juggling a ton right now, and he's like, I want to do more for God. I want to serve more. And I remember talking to him and saying like, hey, given everything in your life and all the upheaval and everything you're trying to walk through right now, I just need you to hear me say you're doing enough. Some of you are overloaded by things that are not just like fun things that you've added to your plate or things that you could like, oh, I could probably step out of that commitment if I want to. Some of us are just overloaded because we're overloaded. But for many of us, I would say most of us, the majority of us, we're overloaded more by personal choice than by circumstantial necessity. And if we haven't created space in our lives to serve others, to serve the church, to serve the people of God, we're not doing an important piece that Jesus left his disciples with when he left. And so I just want to be really clear, like you weren't meant to burn out doing things for God. That's not the call of God on your life. In fact, I think the goal, and we have a group of people who's meeting right now and reading a book together. And one of the quotes this last week that came out for a lot of people that they felt was really helpful was simply this idea that like God doesn't want you to do more so that you can serve him. He actually wants you to choose to do less so that you can serve him. Drop some of the things that you're doing now so that you can serve others in his name. That's the call. That's the invitation. So you weren't meant to burn out doing things for God. You were meant to be filled while being used by God. And that's very different. That's an invitation you can take up. And that's an invitation that will change things. I just got to tell you, like throughout the course of my life, right, I walked through seasons of struggle with faith and struggle with life and all that kind of stuff. And one of the things that I kept coming back to multiple times in ways they never could have imagined I would have is the investment that lots of adults made into my young life when I was a kid, when I was a teenager, when I was a young adult, who loved Jesus and just wanted to share the love of Christ with a generation coming up behind them. These are people who will probably like never write a book about it. You won't see their story anywhere else unless I tell it to you, but they're people who made a significant impact, not just because of one specific person, but because of a whole bunch of people making a small deposit. And because of a whole bunch of people did that, that changed the trajectory of my life. I think of T.D. Wilt, who was my 7th grade Sunday school teacher. And I think of the grief that we gave TD sometimes just for being a 7th grade Sunday school teacher. Like, like 7th grade boys, we have the attention span of a gnat. Now that I'm 43, I have the attention span of 3 gnats. I've grown so much. And I remember being in class with TD and sometimes seeing him, like, I have, like, the look on his face, like, I have no idea how we got to this conversation. I'm going to try to get it back to Scripture. I'm going to try to get back to Jesus, but it is going to be a long haul. And this was years ago, before we even had 6, 7. Like, it wasn't that kind of day, you know? It was still hard. It was still challenging. But I remember him listening to us and caring for us and praying for us. He was a busy guy with kids of his own. Worked a couple of jobs, if I remember correctly, because he was an artist who was doing a thing on the side, but then he had I got to work this job to put food on the table. He was busy. But for several years, he volunteered in that role in the church I grew up in, and I'm grateful for it. Doyle Millard was in his, I think, 50s or 60s by the time I was in high school. I don't know. When you're in high school, even 30-year-olds look like they're like 80, 90 years old, you know? So I'm not exactly sure how old he was. But I remember Doyle's story. Doyle's story was that he and his wife were just lightning rods when they got married. You know, the Apostle Peter, who we just read about, who was a bit of a lightning rod, that was Doyle growing up. I mean, they used to have, when they were in their 20s, they were married, no kids. They had matching convertibles. They would drag race each other through Grand Saline, Texas, the streets of Grand Saline, Texas. They were not, they drank and partied all the time. Like they were always up to something, always in trouble. And then sometime in their mid to late 20s, they found Jesus, entered into a relationship with him. Like everything changed for them. And their lives became way less about themselves and way more about other people. And I remember Doyle teaching my Sunday school class when I was in high school, spending time with us, teaching us through Scripture and the stories of the Bible. And hey, let me just name something. And he may watch this later, but Doyle, I would say this to you if you were in the room. He was not very good at it, okay? Like he was not a great teacher. I don't remember a single lesson Doyle Millard taught me. But I remember feeling like Jesus loved me because Doyle Millard taught me. Mark Jones, in my 20s, was a student pastor who hired me for my very first big church job. And I wasn't that great at it. But he took me to lunch several times a week just to talk to me about how things work and explain life to me and answer any questions I had. He didn't get paid extra for that. He just did it because he wanted to invest in me for a little bit. I could tell you story after story after story of people like that in my life. And those of you who've been around church or in church for a long time, I'll bet if we were to sit down, you'd have lots of stories too. Because when people make an investment in you, it actually changes the trajectory of your own story. It's not always just one person. Sometimes it's the combination, the culmination of all of them. And here's what I love. I love that here at our church, at Versity, the church I get to be a part of now, the church I get to pastor now, like I love that we have hundreds of people who are also choosing to serve their community and also choosing to make an impact on the lives of others. And I just want to talk to you just for a moment about our dream team this morning and the way that they serve. We have over 300 people. I think last I checked, about 330 people on our dream team. And it's amazing. If you serve on the dream team, I just want to thank you so much for the way you serve. And I want to remind you that like all the things that you do, from greeting to production to children to students, like you are making such an impact in the lives of others. We have people who hang out by the doors and even wear shark hats on Jaws Week if they want, like in order to welcome people to our church. And you know what? It's easy to say like, oh, I'm just telling people hello, or I'm just welcoming people to church. You know how hard it is to come to a church for the first time in a long time, or come to the church for the first time ever? Like the barriers for entry are really high, and having some people willing to put a shark on their head to welcome you makes it a little easier to step through the door. These people are setting the table that those who come might enjoy a feast at the table of Jesus. Like that's a beautiful thing to do. We have people who welcome. Roger, in the red here in the middle, like a few weeks ago, was telling someone, like, I think I'm made for this, man. Like, I'm made for welcoming people to this. And he is. He lights up. He lights the room up. We have so many people who work that welcome spot, who welcome new people to our church and let them know, like, we're so thankful that they are here. We have a whole production team. This group of people gets up early, but they make all the things work that works. And they work tirelessly to make things better. We have people who work in our kids department. In fact, my son William is 9 years old, and last week in his school, his teacher asked him, like, hey, name one of your favorite places in the world. I wasn't there for it. I didn't know he had the assignment. I just saw it in his folder when he brought it home, and he said, my church. Because people love me there, and we have a great time, and we get to learn about Jesus. And I know, I have seen, especially Will a couple years ago, he had a hard time sometimes going into his classroom and focusing up. And I saw volunteers like Jen Guerrera and others who like were willing to like take him aside and help him like process a little bit. And I know that they don't just do that because he's my kid. They do that for every kid. They're willing to invest in the lives of every kid. And so I'm so grateful that my kids, who have to be here a lot, like being here. And you want to know why they like being here? It's not because of their dad. It's because of you. They like being here because of you, because you've made an investment in their life. We have people who serve our students. They have we have such a great group of leaders in our students. I'm so thankful for them. Just a few little highlights. Some of you might know Cindy Miller. Cindy works out on our welcome spot a lot of times. She welcomes people. Cindy's smile lights up a room. But what you may or may not realize about Cindy is that she has this habit where if someone needs prayer, she will drop everything she's doing in order to pray with them. It's not even in her official job description. That's just who Cindy is. And there are so many people who have been blessed because Cindy has been more than willing to set aside a few minutes on a Sunday to pray with someone and welcome someone and let them know whatever you're going through, I want you to know you're not doing it alone. I'm here with you. Jesus is here for you. Got your back. We have a volunteer in our student ministry named Isaiah, and I got to talk to Isaiah just a couple weeks ago. I had to point an arrow at him because he looks about the same age as our middle schoolers, but he is older, okay? So Isaiah also, he goes to school, he works at Chick-fil-A, and he volunteers in our student ministry. And I got to talk to him a few weeks ago, and he told me that getting to work with our students is one of the best parts of his life, which is not something I would necessarily expect a young adult to say. This morning, actually, as I was finalizing some slides, my son Jack came into the office where I was finishing things and saw this picture of Isaiah, and he's like, "Oh, Isaiah!" I was like, "Yeah." He's like, "I love that dude." And he started telling me stories about Isaiah playing games with them, and Isaiah going to camp with them, and talking about faith with them. And Jack doesn't even know this, but someday, 10 or 20 or 30 years from now, when he looks back on the people who have impacted his life and who represented Jesus well, it's very likely that Isaiah's name is going to come up. Isaiah may not realize it either, but that's what making these small deposits does. Jill does not know how to make coffee. This is her working at our coffee counter out in the lobby here. She's not. It's not a thing that she had some kind of background as. She didn't she didn't grow up working in intelligentsia or Starbucks. It's not a thing she's done before. But here's what Jill does. Jill looks for opportunities to serve, and she just jumps in. And so this is her not making coffee. This is her taking a coffee order. And I'll bet if we needed Jill to learn how to make coffee, she'd get that done in a week or two, because she really cares. She's the kind of person, there are people all over our church in all different kinds of areas that have awesome stories about Jill. Because all three of these people, Cindy and Isaiah and Jill, and over 300 additional people in our church, keep following after Jesus by picking up their towels and making investments in the lives of others. And this is the beautiful thing that is true, but that we often don't realize. Your service today is someone's story tomorrow. Your choice to pick up the towel today changes someone's trajectory tomorrow. So if you're a follower of Jesus, right? And if you're not, I don't expect you to have to model your life like one. So if you're here and you're still checking faith out, I'm so grateful that you're here. But one of the things I hope that you know is that in following after Jesus, we're the kind of people who try to serve like him as well. It matters to us. So if you're here and you're a follower of Jesus Christ and you're not serving yet, today is your invitation to pick up the towel. Over the next 3 Sundays, not this Sunday, but the 3 after this, we're doing what we're calling a Dream Team test drive. You know, when you want to get a car, or maybe you don't want to, but your other one died, you have to, right? It's not always a fun purchase. But when you need to get a car, you're usually going to go test drive some cars first. And you want to try them out. You want to try them out and see if they work. And so you go and you may test drive a few different models. But the goal is to eventually get a car. And so we have a ton of ways that you can serve here at our church, that you can model Jesus and pick up your towel. But you may not be for sure where you fit or what would align with you or what would light you up. And so over the next 3 Sundays, we're offering a Dream Team test drive. You can try out several different areas with some amazing people who are really great at it and would love to welcome you onto the team. So here's what I'm going to ask you to do. I want everyone to take your phone out. This way, even if you're planning to ignore everything I've said, it looks like you're doing it. Okay, so everybody pull your phone out real fast. And I just want you to grab this QR code. You can either take a picture of it in order to click through to it later, but there's a really short Dream Team test drive page that you can fill out. Very short, and you can choose kind of what you want to do, and we'll get you'll be invited to be a part of this. And this is we have about 330 people who are serving in our church right now. Here's the problem. This is a beautiful problem to have, but let me just name it. We have about 30% more people attending our church right now than we did a year ago. It's wonderful. It's amazing. But we were lagging a little bit in our dream team a year ago, and we've added about 30% more people to the dream team. Problem is our church also grew a whole bunch. So now we're still down a little bit of what we could use. So you have an opportunity to really serve some people who really need to be served. And so I would love if you would consider jumping onto the dream team, at least test driving it for the next few weeks. And you don't have to test drive every Sunday. You could just test drive one Sunday if you wanted to. But we'd love for you to just check it out. Try it, and try to find your fit, because I think that would be amazing. Also, just another thing to maybe be helpful for you. We try not to, it really matters to us that our teams are healthy. So we don't run our teams into the ground. Most people serve a couple times a month. And a lot of people choose to serve one and sit one, meaning they might come for a couple hours on the Sunday that they serve in order to serve in kids, say at the 8:30, and then attend here in the auditorium at the 10:30 or 10:15. That's what time we meet, sorry. Or to be here at the 10:15 and then to serve in kids at the 12. Or serving, production ends up kind of serving most of the day when they serve, but then they serve a little bit less often. So there's all kinds of ways that you can cut this and slice this and do this, but sitting one and serving one is great because you continue to be a part of the thriving life of the church, but you also get to pick up the towel and following after Jesus Christ. And one of the things that Jesus says at the end of chapter 13, or verse 17 of that chapter, he says this: now that you know these things, right? Now that you know that I've called you to serve, now that you know that I've called you to take up your towel, now that you know that I've invited you into this and to look beyond yourself, now that you know these things, God will bless you for doing them. God will bless you for doing them. For the last several years, our church board has been chaired by a volunteer here at our church named Dave Wiles. And Dave has been an awesome church board chair, and he's given way more of his hours than any single volunteer should have to give. And he has cared for our board, and he's cared for me, because that's part of the job of church board chair is to serve our board, serve our church, serve me, and I try to serve them as well. It's reciprocal. We're all trying to serve each other. But Dave has sat with me and listened to me and asked me questions and prayed for me over some wonderful, joyous seasons and some really challenging, difficult seasons. We've talked about our own health issues. He's older than me. He has a lot more health issues than I do. We've talked about our own health issues. We've talked about the health issues of friends and family members. We've prayed for one another. We've prayed for our families. We've discussed lots of things over the years that are sacred, spiritual, wonderful, beautiful things. Yesterday afternoon, I had the opportunity to meet with some of our shepherding elders here at the church. It was just a beautiful time, and Dave's stepping onto that team this year. And they requested if they could pray for me at the end, and my wife and Audrey Eisenberg, our executive pastor, which is a beautiful gesture. And different people prayed for us. And as Dave started to pray, he was the last person who prayed yesterday. Tears started welling up in my eyes, not because of any specific thing he said, but just at the sound of a voice who has cared so much for me over the last several years and served me in this church so well over the last several years. Because your service today is someone's story tomorrow. And when someone changes your story, when someone serves you well, just the sound of their voice is enough to move you emotionally because it mattered so much. Jesus served his disciples well. So many of you are serving the people of our church well and our community well. And so many more of you have the opportunity today to follow in the footsteps of Jesus and pick up the towel and become the kind of person in someone's life that the sound of your voice moves them because you changed their story. Sometimes our stories change because we just tell them differently. It's convenient for us. Sometimes our stories change because someone chose to serve us in the way of Jesus, and it changed our trajectory. Be the person in someone's life that someone's been for you. Be the hands and the feet of Jesus as he's called you to. Choose to serve in our dream team. Give it a shot. Try to impact someone else. You can't believe how much God could use you. Father, thank you for each and every person here today. God, for those already serving our dream team, Lord, for those who are serving this church, this community, I just pray blessings on them. Thank you for the blessing they've been to me, to my kids, to my family, to our staff, Lord, to our people, to strangers who they've met and may never see again. Lord, this church is the church it is because of the way our people serve. I'm grateful for it. And the reality is that we will never know how much impact it made. And yet we're confident that just as Jesus impacted our lives, you will use us to do even greater things on behalf of the kingdom for others. Because he said so. He promised. God, give us the courage to rearrange our schedules and to reorient our lives around the way of Jesus. So, Father, for followers of Jesus, from the sound of my voice this morning, Lord, who are hearing the invitation to service and they're thinking like somebody else will do it, somebody else will step in, somebody else will pick up the weight. God, this morning I ask you to give them a burden to join with all the others around them in picking up a portion of the weight themselves. Help us to follow after Jesus in grabbing the towel, serving others and changing their story. It's in Jesus' name I pray. Amen. I told our band to sit this one out, to give you a moment to gather your things and head on out. So I have no big ending. This is going to end in a kind of like, oh, we're done kind of way. But I'm leaving this up. And if God is impressing on your heart today to serve, I would love for you to grab it and try something over the next several weeks. Our shepherding elders are in the corners of this room, and if you would like prayer on your way out, they would love to pray with you. Thank you so much. Blessings to you. May you have peace and glory to God the rest of your day.